Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for inviting me. This is a topic that I've been engaged with for the past couple of months. And I just want to make some distinctions between who you should be countering and who you should not be countering, or they're talking to them. So this comes from Union of Concerned Scientists information, as well as I've been influenced by Catherine Hayhoe and Michael Mann. So I just want to give credit to all the people who are helping me to distinguish what I need to do. And just to begin with, I'll give some definitions between misinformation and disinformation, but just to say that there's some people that are just not worth talking to. And they're the true climate deniers, the people who just say it doesn't happen. And the good news is there's less than 10% of the population that are climate deniers. And it's decreasing every year. This is way down from what it was 10 years ago or so. According to Michael Mann, there are many other types of people who are confused about the climate, and that's because they're bombarded with disinformation in the media, all kinds of media, and a lot of these people are fostering inaction on climate change, and these are the people that we need to be talking to. We need to be educating them. So one of the large population group is deceivers, the people who just don't believe, who want to deceive us from action, people who are deflecting the blame from corporations. Corporations are doing that and putting the blame on individual behaviors. People who are downplaying it, who say it's not as bad as you think, you know, it's going to take care of itself. And then a large part of these people are people who are deniers. These are people who, dividers rather, who say climate change is important, but we really don't have a consensus of what we should be doing. And they divide climate people one against each other. And I've been really sensitive to this, and it's very disturbing to me that we're not more united in the climate movement, and that we need to come together, form more alliances. And then there's the delayers, the people who say, well, individual action will be enough. And this largely comes from fossil fuel industry that's keeping us from really looking at them and saying, oh yeah, they're really to blame, and we need to do something about it. So you've already heard my introduction. I'm going to go on. We will be focusing on conversations. This is the conversations that you might have in discussions at your place of worship. It might be workshops, actions. It can also be around parties at this time of the year, dinner tables, etc. The Union of Concerned Scientists has an excellent information on countering disinformation in social media. And I'm not going to be covering that tonight, but it's really, that is a huge issue. And if you are interested in countering disinformation in social media, they have people who actually are reporters, and they do those type of things. So we have a couple of short videos that are coming from Union of Concerned Scientists, and they were developed by Sabrina Joy Stevens. And I just want to, she's a communications expert and a strategist who spent years working on and teaching others effective ways to counter information. And we may not get to view them because I have a lot on target that I want to be talking about, but I'll be sharing the slides, and the slides you can view her videos. There's more than what I'm planning to do. So you'll be able to learn a lot more from if you choose to afterwards. Because I'm trying to get through an awful lot, I'm going to ask you to keep your questions until the very end, except for a real short clarification question. And I'm going to be offering examples throughout the session, but feel free to pick your own examples and or ask us to do that. To like, how do you respond to this? Or I've heard this, and I'd be happy to talk about that. So this can be a challenging idea, the idea that some of our assumptions that and past behaviors may not actually be correct. And it's never easy for us to be thinking that we've been manipulated by other people, and that that may be counterproductive for us to be talking to these things. So try to just self-reflect today, keep an open mind, and know what tactics and recommendations that you can use. But everything that I'm talking about is backed by real science and scientists. So what is in disinformation and misinformation, and how are they used? And I just want to say that most of our conversations, it's individuals who use misinformation in climate conversations, whereas interest groups, lobbyists, and especially fossil fuel industry spokespeople intentionally use disinformation, which makes it far more dangerous, and they have a much greater impact. So what is misinformation? Misinformation is false information that's shared out of ignorance or out of error. This is what I find we're going to encounter a lot of. People hear an awful lot in the media. They read articles. They may get snippets of things. So an awful lot of people have a lot of misinformation, and they're climate concerned, but they don't know how to do anything about it. Disinformation is intentionally misleading people. So this is done out of the idea of it's deliberate, and it's intentionally trying to get people to not do anything, not to take climate change seriously, not to vote in elections, not to do any of these things. And the people who particularly who spread this disinformation are political and economic actors who hoard power and wealth. They manipulate all of us. And we've seen this in the elections. We've seen this in so many other issues. And if you go back to examples of the tobacco industry, that was exactly what the tobacco industry was doing with disinformation. And the climate and fossil fuel people have now taken their lead from the how tobacco misled us for so long. So people, both individual actors as well as these powerful people, can use disinformation, and they use 3 manipulation tactics to divide and conquer. In other words, to keep us from being united, working together. They want to mislead and misdirect us, and they want to overwhelm and exhaust us. And I think it's our role really to not be misled and not to be overwhelmed or exhausted. And it's hard not to be overwhelmed and exhausted, particularly all the news that we're hearing from the international sources and that we get every day in news. So it's important just to keep our head up. So when you hear a statement, the first thing I want you to do is to be thinking of, was this statement made in good faith? And we're talking about a conversation that you're having with an individual. If it's a misinformation and an honest mistake, then by all means, you want to try to pursue a conversation with this person. You want to try talking to this person, maybe helping them to identify the truths. If it's disinformation, personally, I would say it's not made in good faith and it's done intentionally to harm people. I would say, as an individual, it's probably not worth our while. So when you hear disinformation from an individual, try to change the subject, because it's probably not worth it. You're not going to change somebody's attitudes, values in a 2 or 3 sentence conversation. The other group of people that I would say it's probably not worth talking to or trying to dissuade them are the doomers, the people who say it's too late to do anything. It's generally, we're not worth engaging in them, because it's going to take an awful lot for them to be convinced, and you don't necessarily have the expertise to do it. One thing you might do is send them some information, though, or send them an article to read. So if you want to stop the conversation and you think it's a real climate change denier or someone who's trying to spread information, do so. I mean, you decide, I'm not going to engage in this person. So one way of doing it is, I never thought about that in that way. And you're not amplifying or repeating that information. That's one of the key messages that you want to hear tonight is, do not amplify the disinformation and do not repeat it. And this has to do with in social media, it has to do in conversations. So don't start your sentence with, yes, but blah, 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 or I do not agree with blah, blah, blah. Just change the tone of the conversation or the topic of the conversation. So one of the most important things to be thinking about is, if this is misinformation, do you want to engage with this person? Do you have a future relationship with this person? Is this your uncle that you're going to be seeing again repeatedly? Is this a coworker that you've got to be talking to? And if it is, then you want to try to build a connection. You want to try to find out how they came from this position and where you can find some connections, some common points. So suppose you've decided it's worth it to make a connection with this person, and because you have either it's a relationship that you already have, but you want to make sure that you can do something. So the person says to you, how can there be climate warming when it is so cold outside? Climate change is a hoax. So what I would like us to unmute and just say, what can you say now if to somebody who says that can there be climate warming when it is so cold? Climate change is a hoax. This is probably misinformation as opposed to disinformation. And I cannot view the screen while I'm presenting. So if you can just unmute and talk would be fine. We're a small enough group, you could do that.
You could say, go online and read about what's happening in Australia, where down there it's summer.
Okay.
I would say, how do you differentiate between climate and weather? What's your understanding of the difference between the two?
That's a great analogy. And the difference between climate and weather. Do you want to explain the difference between climate and weather?
You'd like me to explain?
Yeah, you clearly know the difference. Otherwise, I can do it.
Okay, yeah. Well, weather is very brief changes in temperature, precipitation, and so on that change from day to day, week to week. Climate pertains to long-term changes over decades. So you may have changes in weather in one decade, and then the climate will shift over several decades, and you may have changes in weather in the subsequent decade, but the weather ranges, the weather variability will be different than original.
Yeah.
I'm not very articulate. I hope that helps.
No, it's great. Weather is local, climate is global. So there's, and the other thing is these people might be cherry picking information. You know, this was a particularly cold thing. And I like to illustrate the idea, the difference between weather and climate with two analogies that everybody can buy into. The one is if you were walking your dog around a circular path in the park, the dog makes many what we might call side trips. You know, he's going away from the path up and to the left and to the right. That's weather. And the overall path around the park is climate. So there are many deviations from that straight line by the dog, but that's it. He still gets from point A back to point A again. And the other analogy that I like to think about is a superstar athlete. You can fill in whatever sport you want. And overall, their record is climate, but they may have a bad day once in a while, and that bad day is the deviations from the regular performance, and that's weather. So if you want to continue talking about somebody with somebody, and you think, well, are there other people in earshot who might be better and who want to engage? Do you want to continue talking about climate destruction at this gathering? Do you want to talk about it other ways? So just be thinking about who you're talking to. And messengers matter. Is this somebody who cares for you, somebody who would respect you, or perhaps this is not somebody that you really need to be engaging in? So do be thinking about that you may not be the best person, or you may be the one with the agency. Maybe you're the person in the family that people look up to. Maybe you're trusted because of your actions. So you want to emphasize that we don't have to be experts in the facts. We don't have to tell them all the facts, bombard them with the facts. What we want to do instead is show that we care about them. We want to create a connection with them. We want to build a relationship. And as I say, we may not be the best messenger. So to try to rebuild trust with somebody who made the comment about, well, climate change must be a hoax, there's 5 things to keep in mind. Keep a calm, non-judgmental attitude. People don't like to be yelled at. People don't like to be told that they're an idiot or that was a stupid comment. you want to prioritize empathy over expertise. So try to find a connection with them, try to listen to them, try to really show that you care, and look for and acknowledge underlying concerns, and then use your expertise to explain the truth in a way that speaks to their underlying concerns. So now I would like us to have a little bit of a dialogue on how do we use these 5 techniques to answer the question. Since it's a faith group, somebody says to you, God will take care of the earth. How can we respond to that one?
So I would say more about that.
That's a great opener for anything. Any questions, say more, tell me more. That shows that you're listening, that you care, and that you're trying to establish a connection. Any other ways? Any other responses?
I would say that God made us stewards, and God uses people to do work.
And you could quote scripture to show that God made us stewards of the earth. Lots and lots of examples of that in scripture.
What about God helps those who help themselves? Are we
Yep.
helping ourselves?
Yep, that's another good answer. Any other answers? These are all wonderful answers.
I guess one thing that, I feel, that I personally am called by God to do this. So I would basically say, I feel that God is using me specifically.
Mm-hmm. That would be a great way of saying, this is me, and I'm hoping that you also can come along with this. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can amplify accurate ideas and not spread misinformation or disinformation. So you want to amplify better ideas. You want to stop spreading it. And this is so you never repeat what the misinformation was. And also you want to think about how much time do you want to have in this conversation. And this is particularly true if this is a social gathering. Maybe you want to say, I'm going to just say to this person, how about we meet afterwards, or we have a side conversation or something of this nature. But particularly if you're engaged in social media, before you decide to respond, just decide whether it's worth taking them on, decide whether or not you want to engage, and then set limits on this. So it's so easy for us to amplify what they said and to spread it. So it's just important to be thinking, well, how much do I want to engage? So some pitfalls in doing this, and I'm going to address these pitfalls. The first one is centering facts over storytelling. I'm a psychologist, and I've spent my career on teaching and learning. People remember stories far better than they remember facts. And if you think of the teachers who taught you through storytelling, they're the ones you still remember today. So you want to put facts in, but you want to put facts into your personal story. So the personal story that you have is really important. Another pitfall is to focus on doom and gloom stories, like it's too late, we can't do anything about it, and to focus on all of the horrible things that are happening in the earth. And then it's hard for us to bust the myths, but it's oftentimes we want to not bust the myths, but change the subject. And a lot of people manipulate their audience through fear and anger. That doesn't actually get anybody to change their ideas. It gets you just upset. And the fifth pitfall is to use passive voice. Instead of saying so-and-so or such and such a company did such and such, you say it happened or something. And then many people overestimate the opposition, and they underestimate how much power we have. So I want to show a video here. This is Joy herself, Sabrina Joy speaking.
Now that we've examined some common communications mistakes advocates tend to make, Let's talk about how we can correct them. Instead of centering facts and statistics in our communication, it's more powerful to use individual stories to illuminate collective trends. Again, I want to emphasize that facts and statistics are important. We just need to situate them within the context of people-centered narratives that folks can understand and connect to. Representative Cori Bush offered a great example of this while promoting the Unhoused Bill of Rights she introduced in 2021. Drawing on her own experiences as an unhoused working mother, she explains what it's like and what society can do for millions of other people who still need housing and support. Good storytelling helps us explain facts and statistics in real-world terms, while helping people see that issues we might have thought were ours to shoulder alone are actually collective responsibilities. Another way we can avoid communications pitfalls is by naming what is and emphasizing what's possible, instead of repeating doom and gloom stories that send the message that things are hopeless. Effective messaging and storytelling conveys just enough about a problem to help people understand it, while reserving the bulk of our airtime to showing people how much better life will be when they take action to solve it. Here we have an example of a graphic showing how every home in Washington, D.C. could be powered by solar energy for the same amount of money the U.S. spends just looking for new fossil fuel sources every year. Expanding people's sense of what's possible is an important way to overcome bad actors' efforts to overwhelm and exhaust people into inaction. Showing people what we can do to overcome a negative status quo helps us cultivate a sense of safety and possibility, so people will start to feel secure enough to take a chance on change. Instead of myth busting and being reactive, we can use news cycles and real-world incidents to advance our own narratives and overarching goals. By getting clear on our purpose and the overall narrative we're trying to advance, we can use timely news hooks or even highly visible disinformation attempts to attract attention to our key causes and messages instead. So for example, during this moment where Donald Trump was spreading disinformation about voting, my co-authors and I took an attempt to mislead and misdirect people into forfeiting a safe, convenient voting option and turned it into an opportunity to promote the messaging and actions we were already trying to elevate. Another way we can avoid the pitfall of manipulating audiences through fear and anger is by meeting people where they are to lead them somewhere better. It's not necessary to exploit people's emotions. Instead, we can acknowledge their existing hurts and fears and then show them how they can be part of building solutions to the problems that harm them and the people they care about. Giving people a sense of what they can do to address the problems that scare and upset them is kinder and more powerful than playing into their anxieties and outrage. When we share strategic paths forward in aspirational, actionable terms, we give ourselves and our audiences clarity and hope. Those are far more sustainable sources of motivation for our work. Instead of using the passive voice, we can name actors and systemic dynamics that are responsible for the conditions we're organizing to overcome. Environmental degradation, injustice, and oppression don't just happen. People make decisions that create those conditions.
Oop. Sorry.
Naming those dynamics helps audiences move from a state of being passively overwhelmed to purposefully engaging. And last but not least, instead of overestimating our opposition and underestimating our power, we can learn to speak from a position of power, the power of the people and of truth. No matter who you are or what your cause, you have some kind of power. Own it. We have more public support on many issues than bad actors do. That's why they work so hard to manipulate us into taking unhelpful action or doing nothing. Showcasing our victories or our growth and momentum if we're not yet in a winning position gives people hope that they can help make a positive difference. Everyone wants to join a winning team. When we tell the right stories with the right calls to action, we help close the communication gaps that bad actors exploit to spread lies and confusion, while showcasing the kinds of causes and campaigns that matter most to us.
Okay, so just to summarize what Sabrina said, instead of talking about just facts, use your own stories, use stories from the news, but make it personal. How did it affect your family? And instead of focusing on doom and gloom, name what it, focus what on is possible. Talk about some success stories, and it's easy enough to hear about success stories. Like just when before the meeting, we were talking about diverting pumpkin from being in landfall. It's a success story. Every little thing helps. Use news cycles and real life incidents to advance your narrative and your goals. And then we want to meet people where they are and lead them to somewhere better, name the bad actors and the systemic dynamics, and speak from a position of power. And I think all of us here do speak from a position of power. So now what I want to do is do a little bit more of this of practicing. So these are actual quotes that I read from a research study that was conducted of surveys of people in Western Pennsylvania who were not exactly climate informed. Many of them were living in a heavily fracked area. And these were the quotes that they wrote on the survey. Moving away from fossil fuels will drive up energy costs and gas prices. These are separate people, separate responses. The push to clean energy is taking away local jobs and ruining the economy. The primary impact of climate change in my life and those of my community is increased taxes. So if you hear any of your friends or colleagues, relatives saying any of these three statements, how would you respond?
Well, to the second one, you could respond that in fact, there is a new economy coming, that a lot of our current economy is based on the dead end model of carbon fossil fuels and leading us in a very bad, basically the end of civilization as we know it. Now, that might sound extreme, but we have to work together to change our basic sources of energy. And in that process, there are many new jobs that will be built. And people who are unemployed now could be filling those jobs.
And then you could fill it in with some facts. For example, there are more people employed in Pennsylvania in clean energy jobs now than there are in coal. So that's a fact that would fit with that narrative that you just gave. How about the other two?
Phyllis, one of the things that I would be inclined to say, but I don't know if is good to say, is where did you get that information?
Yeah, yep, exactly. It's a great question. It's a great question to say, where did you get that information? Is it from Fox News? Is it from something they read on social media? And then maybe you can help them to find another source to find things. So yes, always asking that question is great.
As far as the first one, moving away from fossil fuels will drive up energy costs and gas prices. In fact, the price of solar and wind has dropped so greatly that it is now cheaper than coal and possibly oil, and is continuing to drop.
And that there's money available from the federal government for people, institutions to invest in these, in solar and wind. How about the third one, the idea that climate is causing us to have increased taxes? Any ideas of how to address that?
Yeah, can say that in fact that we pay a lot in taxes to support fossil fuel industries that is never seen on the budgets. And they also provide us with enormous expenses on health problems that are caused by fossil fuels. And clean energy will not have those problems.
I just did some research on the amount of money going to the fossil fuel industry in Pennsylvania. And as of 2021, it was $3.9 billion overall in terms of subsidies and all other kinds of advantages. $3.9 billion. So I would use that fact and say, okay, so if we didn't have to pay that to the fossil fuel industry, perhaps your taxes would go down.
And so, Phyllis, I wonder if, tell me if this is a tact that you can take. So for the third one, the primary impact of climate change in my lifetime is increased taxes. I would say as a person of faith, one of the things that concerns me is the people who are impacted by burning fossil fuels and the health risks that are involved. And then the increased health risks, not just for these children in areas that are surrounded by whatever kind of, fracking or gas, trash to steam, but it ends up being our children and our grandchildren that are impacted by this. I don't know if that has less fact and more sort of, I care about my kids as a person of faith. I care about my siblings in the world who are impacted by this.
It's always good that what you did actually is you changed the topic. You went from taxes to health benefits and the cost of the health problems. So that was actually a great tactic to use because you put a lot of facts into it. You changed the subject and you did not amplify increased taxes. So that was a great, absolutely wonderful strategy. I've given this presentation before, but you're the most knowledgeable audience. I am not surprised. Your answers were all absolutely wonderful. And we can all learn from all of them. So now, what have you heard, or what would you like us to respond to? What questions do you have?
Well, I do wonder when people who are driving, gas-powered vehicles are very anxious about maintaining what they're familiar with, let's say, and they ask about how they're going to, that people are so concerned about gas and having gas to power vehicles. I think, it's a security thing, it's a mobility thing, it's a sense of about having control over their lives. I'm just wondering about like how to respond to, I don't have enough knowledge, I feel, to respond with information, but I wonder how to respond to that fear.
Well, I can speak from personal experience. I consider myself to be a zealot for my electric vehicle. And anytime anybody raises that, I talk about the fact that you don't have to have range anxiety because there's apps that will show you where you can plug in. And I talk about how much I love my car. I mean, people who have electric vehicles generally love them, whether they have Teslas or they have Chevys. Everybody loves them. And I also talk about driving from Philly to Boston on a regular basis. And they go, with your electric car? And I said, yeah, I plan to stop twice, and I charge my car. And they say, well, how long does that take? And I'll say about an hour to charge it for about 100 miles. And that gives me a break. I can go to the bathroom, get something to eat, and walk around a little bit. And then I go back on the road as a refreshed and safe driver. So it's a great thing. I mean, you can talk about personal experiences, and you can refer them to an organization that's called Plug in America. And it has all kinds of wonderful information.
That's great. Thank you. And it's good to have, I think specifics. I think people get scared, have these sort of vague fears, and having more specific information is grounding. So thank you. That's great.
And I think people don't realize that there are charging stations everywhere, because they're not signs on the highway. Like if you see a food and fuel stop, they're going to tell you that you can get a pizza or that you can get a cup of coffee, but they should have on there a little logo that says EV charging also. I mean, we need to promote that there really are EV chargers. I live in Lower Merion, and the app on my house, there's like 12 charging stations within 3 miles of my house.
That's great. I know Mom's Organic Market has a bunch, for instance.
And they're free.
Yeah.
Phyllis, I have difficulty with somebody who shows a lot of paraverbals, a sarcastic attitude, and multiple insinuations and distortions all together, like, oh yeah, that's right, you environmentalists don't know what you're doing, and you screwed up everything with your dumb your dumb changes, things like that. So I'm getting a tone of voice. I'm getting a facial expression simultaneously with 2 or 3 or 4 other insinuations thrown into the same brief expression.
Yep, and they're angry that you're going to ruin their lifestyle. They're not going to be able to fly, eat meat, and they're going to be living in a horrible life. I hear that, and so how would we respond to that? You've been a great audience with great answers so far. So let's think about attitude. You know, the person is insinuating that we're taking away their lifestyle, or we're ruining it for everybody. We're kooky environmentalists.
Could you focus on the paraverbals? The things that really throw us off, like the facial expression, the sarcastic tone of voice,
Right.
things like that.
So we want to remain calm. We want to remain objective. We want to try to connect with them. So let's talk about some very specific things that you can do.
So-
Phyllis, I'm going to just add on a question to Howard's is, I mean, I've kind of been in some situations like this, and it seems like that from what your advice is some of these people you just don't want to engage with.
Mhm.
But I guess what Howard's alluding, or that situation that he's talking about, I just feel a lot of times just completely thrown off. So I guess my question is, should we have a planned response? Like usually I feel like planned conversations are not good, but like, I feel like, almost like, you just know what you're going to say in a situation like that, that's general enough to apply to a lot of things.
That is actually what Sabrina Stevens recommends, is that you do have a planned elevator speech to give to them. And it takes a little bit of time for you to develop that. And in the slides, you will see that she has some other ideas. But yeah, it's very important to have a planned response to them. So let's talk about even just one sentence of what we want to say to somebody like that.
I'll try a little bit here. Phyllis, I find this really hard.
It is.
Both because I immediately go to, oh, I don't have quite the right facts, even though I've been reading and reading, I don't. But I guess if listening and trying to replicate what you're saying, I think I would say, I see you have a lot of fear, and I have to admit, so do I, but maybe we have fear about different things. I'm personally really concerned because I've got more and more friends with horrible asthma and struggling with the pollution that is caused. I'm scared for my children because I love them and I want them to have a world where they feel safe raising children. So for me, those fears outweigh, the fear of driving a different car or having to bring my own bags to the grocery store, conveniences. I see life in a different way. What are the things you're most afraid of? And sort of trying to turn it that way. Is that what you're trying to get us to do?
Yeah, excellent. You did a number of you used a number of great techniques when you established a connection. I also am fearful. Maybe you and I are fearful of slightly different things, but I'm fearful. And you talked about what are the real reasons to be fearful. We're fearful of the diseases that people are getting. We're fearful of the future for our kids. So those are real fears, but you're also saying, but I'm willing to act. So I want to engage in some things. It's not like hopeless, we can't do anything. So that was actually an excellent answer. Anybody else want to try? This is really tough.
Yeah, one of the things that I sometimes approach it with is that, in fact, and assuming that we're talking locally here to somebody, is to remind that we are living in probably the best place in the world to be living, that the effects of climate change are relatively a long way off from us. And it's large effects, that we're not suffering drought, we're not being pounded by large, oversized hurricanes, we don't have fires, we're not losing our cropland, and that in fact that this is a global problem, and other areas are people are trying to think of where how they can escape this problem. We are very contented with where we are, but we are also inflicting the engine of our lifestyle on others. And to remind them that many of those migrants that are showing up at our southern border along the Rio Grande in Texas, along Arizona, all those places are people who no longer can support themselves on where they have lived for many generations. So to remind them how lucky we are that so far we have escaped the big hammer of it.
Excellent answer. You've added facts. You made it very personal and very local, but you said, it's our lifestyle that we're having other people to have problems with. So these are excellent answers, but can continue thinking about this answer that we want to give them, because we do encounter people with attitude and feeling like, oh, you environmentalists, you're ruining it for all of us. I just want to move on now, because we do want to get to some ideas about building your narrative, which you want to be using the 3 A's of accurate, aspirational, and actionable. Accurate is a message that gives truth, and you're talking about it that's backed up by your own experience. It's also backed up by rigorous research. Something that's aspirational, something that talks about a more positive future, so that audiences can see that you can do things and answer your call to action. And then very actionable, and we will get to an action in a minute. Actionable messages. What are the steps that you can take, and what are the important actions that you need to be doing? So be thinking about actionable, aspirational, and accurate when you're building your message. And remember, you don't want to repeat what they've said. You want to, and you don't want to amplify what they've said. So before we go to actions, are there other questions that people have?
I have a personal question, Phyllis. Have you been able, I mean, you're well versed in this type of thing already, I know, but have you seen or been in a situation where you've been able to use these tools?
I have. I go out of my way to have these conversations with people, and it's hard. And I think building that personal connection is really important, and making that decision, is it worth engaging in this person? And sometimes I'll say, it's probably not appropriate for us to do this over Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't have it with my family for Thanksgiving, but or a social event from work or something. Let's talk about it later. And then I'll say, let's get together. And then the person, and I want to hear that person out. I want to hear what they have to say and really start making a connection. I had one person say she never thought about it from this direction. She's not convinced, but at least she was open to hear about it. It's hard work. It really is. Other questions?
Phyllis, I'm just curious, as is this seen as like each one teach one? Is it that sparks of light grow kind of a movement, or grow more awareness and more acceptance?
Oh, yeah. In fact, the training that I took from Union of Concerned Scientists was a train the trainer type of thing. They asked us to go out and train either people in some capacity, or to do individual training. So yes, it certainly is. That's one of the reasons that I'm engaging in these kind of talks, is all of you could now go out and have these conversations. You're all very knowledgeable, even though you don't think you know enough, you do. And your answers were absolutely wonderful answers. Other questions?
Can I ask something about the about responding to the paraverbals?
Yep.
If somebody came across the way I described, is it useful to say. Are you being sarcastic? Are you? And could you explain what's behind that? So asking them to explain, but labeling the nonverbal emotional communication.
I like your second answer better. Can you explain? Are you being sarcastic? If it's said in one way can be an insult to somebody, or it can send them off guard. But it depends on the person. If you know that person and you know their sense of humor, or you know how they talk, maybe you can use that. But certainly the second part of what you said was, please explain it. Tell me more. Where did you get that point of view? Who did you hear it from? You're opening up a dialogue with them.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Other questions?
I guess my question would be, and I know you already went over that there's certain people not to engage with, but say that someone, you've decided that you want to engage with this person, but at the moment they're very angry
Mhm.
and kind of really confrontational. I'm assuming that the best way to say, can we talk about this another time? Or
Yeah. I'll just use my own personal example of when you're very angry at your child, or your child's very angry at you. It's the worst time to try to engage in dialogue with them. And I think that's probably true with these type of people too. So, talk about it in terms of, let's, try to cool them down a little bit. They're not going to cool down, but try to have a dialogue in a rational way, and not when they're really, really angry. It's very tough because many of these people are as engaged as we are, and they're very passionate about how they feel as we are passionate. But anger is not the time to engage with anybody. So I want to move now to some actions, suggested actions. Have an open conversation with somebody whose views differ from your own. I just moved to a new place, and I plan to have some of these conversations with the people that I barely know, just to see how well they're doing. Try to develop that story, that canned speech that you're going to give somebody who gives you something. Try to, develop, even if it's just a 3-minute speech about, or 1 minute, about why it's important to you and why you want to be doing something. You want to try to help those who are scared or overwhelmed by acknowledging their fears, and then acknowledging that it is overwhelming, but there are things that can be doing. And we want to try to move people to action. And what all the literature says is that we ourselves as individuals can't really make a huge change. We can make a little change. We certainly can serve as a role model. We can be a spark to other people. But when we join organizations such as Interfaith Power and Light, or any other organization, then we start to have a much bigger impact. So the other thing that I want to show you is this, if I can find it, it's the Union of Concerned Scientists climate thing. Let me see if I can get it. I had it on my screen, but now it's going to be hard. At any rate, it's, I'll finish the presentation, and then I'll show you the climate button. There it is. So the Union of Concerned Scientists has developed this climate button, which is interactive. And it'll say, okay, the first thing you want to do is you can urge Congress to investigate fossil fuels. And then they say, take action. And they'll then tell you, you can sign this petition, which I've already signed. Or you can, let's see if I can get back to. And the other thing that I like about this button is that it says, you want to give me something easier to do, similar to do, or harder to do. And there's a lot of actions that you can take that are individual actions that are easier to do. So it's a worthwhile button for you to try to do. And it's climate button at ucsusa.org. And I just want to acknowledge, that this work comes from Union of Concerned Scientists, Sabrina Joy Stevens, Michael Mann. These are people that I respect. And places where you can find more information. There's a website that's called Cranky Uncle, HTTP Cranky Uncle. He actually debunks a whole bunch of things in a scientific way. It's really worth going to that site, http://crankyuncle.com. He's a scientist and he debunks it. So thank you very much. And further questions?
It was really interesting, Phyllis, and it just strikes me that this kind of communication is good for all of our struggles with reaching people who have different opinions, and it's just important way to think about how we interact.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, Chuck just froze.
I think he's frozen.
So I was going to say one of the things that I've learned in doing interfaith work is you start from a position of curiosity. So I'm really curious to know, why you're fearful about this, because I'm fearful about a lot of things. What makes you fearful about this? I'm curious. And just saying that word curious lowers the temperature in the room, because then they think that you're interested.
Mhm.
Which hopefully you are.
Mhm.
Chuck, there you go. You were frozen. We missed what you said.
I just was thanking Phyllis for all the work she has done in this area.
Phyllis, you're amazing.
It's not that hard to do this. I mean, once you have these slides, you can start doing this in your own faith organization if people are interested in doing this. The training that I took from UCS was short. It was a couple of hours, and everything else is just the reading that I've been doing. But if you have any desire to do this yourself, use my slides, modify them. And you'll see in the slide pack, there's also more little vignettes, little videos from Sabrina, which I didn't include just because I think they take up a lot of time. And she's also more concerned about bad actors, social media, and disinformation.
Phyllis, thank you so much for teaching us tolerance and teaching us how to teach tolerance, and to join the party that I for myself might really get my shekels up and not and go to war.
Yeah, right.
Just really
And not to
friend.
I mean, they say that, how many times have you seen a tweet? And I know my kids do this all the time. They get an email, they got a tweet, and all they do is they repeat it to me. And it's like they're amplifying that information. And most people don't realize that how dangerous it is once you retweet or once you just copy and paste, because then many more people are seeing it. And
Yeah.
the more you see something wrong, the more you believe it to be true.
Thank you. That's one. There's a lot that is helpful about the conversation today and the presentation, but one is about not amplifying and repeating information, and another is the tone of humility that I think we're talking about, like coming to these interactions with a sense of humility, and I think curiosity is part of conveying that. That's really helpful. And I love the thing of sharing our own vulnerability and our own fear with people. So thank you.
So one of the things I was thinking about, Phyllis, when you brought up the temperature, or like the weather versus the climate, was one thing that I try to do is when I hear people just in conversation, just kind of making a joke, not trying, about climate and weather, is just informing them. Like when my kids were small enough that I went to the bus stop and somebody said something, and just making sure they know that there's a difference, and we need, even if they know there's a difference and it's just a joke, it makes it, you shouldn't joke about it. That, and then the other thing, I forgot, but I'll remember at some point.
But I think that's an important point when we're in our bubble, like in this meeting here, we all definitely believe in climate, even for us to make a joke about it. It's just a bad practice for us to do it. The people will say, there's no such thing as climate change, right? Ha ha. And we're in our bubble. So, we could say that, but we don't know who else is listening. We don't know where this is going to leak out to. Well, Phyllis, who's such a climate denier, that's such a climate change person, doesn't even believe in it. That's a really important point.
Phyllis, since Michael Mann has gone to Penn from Penn State, is he, let's say, is he active in the Philadelphia area giving talks, or?
I think he gives talks around the world.
Yeah.
I wonder, this is just my own personal thing. I wonder whether he was recruitable from Penn State to Philadelphia just because it was easier for him to give talks and get on an airplane
Oh.
and not having to drive long distances. But I also know that Penn can recruit very good people and has a very good way of recruiting them. But I have not seen him speak any more locally than he does. I think he knows that the world is listening to him and reading his books.
Yeah.
Phyllis, this is very interesting. One of the things that we were advised to do through other trainings is to paraphrase back what the other person says, so they have the feeling that they've been heard. And from what you're saying, we should really avoid that because it tends to spread the misinformation.
If you can change it so that what they're saying is, take some of what they're saying and make it the truth, that would be the best. But that's very hard. But yeah, I have heard that in trainings, not about climate, but paraphrase what they're saying as a way of saying, I understand you, I hear you, but you are amplifying it. And it was somebody that was speaking at an organization, and she sent out a handout, and I read the handout, and it was nothing but exactly what you've done. It was amplifying and paraphrasing and that sort of stuff. And I wrote her an email afterwards, and I said, look at what you've done. You've paraphrased and you amplified. So it's very, very common. All of her statements were yes, blah, 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 but.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things is that we need to do is turn down the heat. That is in the heat from the energy that's generated, and also in our conversations, not to engage in something that just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. That I think that there is a significant change that is coming, and not to do things that build little bunkers along the way.
Yeah, and it's important to get out of our bubble, and that's something that I know I need to do more of. It's very comfortable talking to you because you're already on board and you're very much, we're very aligned, but we need to talk to people that are not so on board.
So I'm wondering if, just in terms of wording things, and I'm wondering if this example I'm going to give is an example of amplifying, or if it's more like a joining kind of thing. Like if someone says, like, the thing about if it's if climate change is happening, why is it so cold? And in starting to talk about the distinguishing between climate and weather, to say to someone, yeah, that can sound confusing. I can understand that. Here's an explanation, blah, blah, blah. Is that amplifying, or is that useful?
It's useful, and you didn't restate what they said. You just said in general, this sounds confusing. And I think making people aware of the difference between climate and weather is something that people don't understand. And certainly weather people on the radio and the television don't ever really give it enough airtime. So that's why I like the two analogies, because everybody can relate to a dog walking a dog or relate to a superstar athlete. You know, those are the differences between deviations from the norm and what is the norm. But yeah, I think just saying, I hear you is fine, but don't, I hear you, blah, 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 I would not be fine.
Got it. Thank you.
I want to honor our time and thank Phyllis again for being with us, and thank you all for your wonderful questions and your wonderful responses. I do have the PowerPoint, and this has been recorded, so I'll be sharing this along with the information in the chat. Appreciate your ideas for upcoming programs. Phyllis, thank you so much for your time, effort, and energy on this topic, which is really important. And I imagine that when I thought of us meeting tonight, that we've already come from a time of Thanksgiving when maybe we face these things, right? And now we have a whole month of celebrations that are going to give us more opportunities to practice. And I think it's all about practicing. We have to step up to the plate and try to hit the ball, because if we don't, we're never going to have an opportunity to know if what we say will work. So thank you for giving us tools. We appreciate it.
And practice with those tools. We all need to practice. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis.